You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Everybody, welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona, or on the road, actually. With me are my good friends,
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And Shannon G from Mesa AZ.
We are happy to be here. I know, I love that. It gets better every time. I'm actually on the road, so this is, for me, this is kind of exciting. I get to do this from out of state. We're actually in Colorado at the moment. Unfortunately for me, it's a working trip, and I didn't get to bring any airplanes, but I was at home last week and was able to kind of get out to the field. Many of you know I've been working on my my Sparrow, which is my big turbine, and I had a little time at home between working, and so I was able to get my lights working on it, and I got my gear and everything all sequenced up, and we put it all together. And of course, my buddy Barry's like, "Hey, bring it out to the field. We'll check it out. Maybe we'll fly it." And so I drug it all out there, and in case you don't know, they're doing redoing our Armada on our field. So if you're familiar with Sun Valley Flyers, they've removed the old one and are putting the new one up, but they're kind of waiting on the permitting stuff. And so as a result, it's really, really hot out there, and there's no shade. So everybody shows up early, and by 9 o'clock in the morning, we're all gone, So anyway, I took the airplane out there, and we actually wound up learning the turbine, testing it, taxiing, trying to taxi, but then we realized that something happened in my sequencing of the steering gyro. So now the steering gyro is correcting in the direction you're steering. And so it's like twice as bad. If you're trying to taxi, I was like, okay, we're not going to take off. We're not going to fly it, but we got everything else all settled up. And so I was excited to get out there and fly. And then Barry got a new turbine I was going to get to fly yet, but we had some visitors. And a couple guys moved down from Montana, actually up in kind of the north west corner. And they came down with a couple of EDFs and gave us a call and said, hey, can we come out and meet us? And so we did. And Patrick was one of the young man's names. And so Barry let him kind of fly the turbine. And I gave up my spot at the sticks for him. But it brings us to a good kind of a good segue, because it is summertime. It is in Arizona. It's very, very hot. I think this week Shannon is supposed to get to like 118 or something, right? It's supposed to be super, super hot.
We're like, Phoenix, we're 3 blocks from the sun. So
that's true. 3 blocks, 3 right turns, and you're right there.
We're not the third rock from the sun. We're 3 blocks from the sun.
3 blocks. Yeah. So anyway, the Phoenix, as well as some of the other places in Colorado, it's 100 degrees here, and
that's cool.
I will tell you that, cool compared to there. But I will tell you that density altitude plays a big part. And coming from an aviation background, that these guys came down, and I told them, I said, hey, I noticed you guys have EDFs. I said, I'm not really sure where you're from, but being as hot as it is out here, you're definitely going to have a difference in performance, because I wasn't really sure where they came from. He told me they were in Montana, but I didn't know if they, whereabouts they were. And they laughed at me and they said, oh, well, we're up at 5,500 feet. And I go, okay, well, then you won't see any performance difference because they're already up at the high altitude. And so they're used to flying really lethargic. So when they came down here, even though it was hot, they actually got better performance than what they're used to. But density altitude does play a big part, especially in an EDF. And as a result, you can get, what you're normally used to, flying fast, low, having a lot of lift. Sometimes that can get away from you in the hot air. There's a lot less air to be flying around in, so you're not quite squishing the air like you would if you're in Miami or down in Houston or somewhere in a sea level area. So just a word of caution, kind of got to be careful if you're flying at in hot altitudes or high altitudes or hot weather. Kind of the same. So but we had a really good time, and they enjoyed it. We spent a couple hours with them and sit and chit-chatted and had a really good time. Hopefully they'll be back.
Nice.
They were talking about joining the club, so hopefully we'll see them out there. They're really good sticks too. I was really impressed. I think they're going to give most of us a run for their money. They were doing high speed inverted passes down the runway. So that was always good to see those as opposed to somebody just up there trying to figure it out how to fly. We did have a new guy. He had a little trainer. It was an apprentice, and he just got a new radio, and so he was out there taxiing it around. And I gave him my name and number, told him I could, kind of help him out being an AMA instructor. I was like, yeah, if you have any questions, here you go, give me a call. So we, he taxied around, and he didn't fly his because he was just trying to get the radio all tweaked. But yeah, we had a great time. But the heat is a killer.
Yeah. So I went out to my garage, and all of my EDFs are like cowered in the corner. Like they're like, I don't want to fly. I don't want to fly. So I've kind of just let them rest for a few more weeks till it cools down. And also, I mean, I've seen planes melt like to and from the field if the window hits it just right. I mean, I don't have a huge window. I've got things blocked out, but I had a friend of mine had a hatchback. And literally, got to the field and didn't touch anything for a while. He goes to get his plane out, and it folded. Like that's how hot the foam.
The foam.
Yeah, like the foam, he was like drew. Yeah, it was almost like gooey. It was like, oh my gosh, it was all alligatory, and it was like, oh my god, I can't fly that now.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So
we get alligator here if you leave them out, but that's about it. I said, here in Texas, if you underneath the canopy, it'll get all alligatory, or the foam will puff up or whatever, but not melting. Like
I just think the way the sun was hitting that hatchback, and he didn't have like any tinting or anything. If he had tinting, it probably would help, but it was just a random thing. This was a couple years ago. It was like when it was like a couple years ago. It was even hotter than now, supposedly.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it's hotter. It's pretty hot right now. So, but so that's been I've been tinkering with I got a crawler. I've been tinkering with that.
That's true. He crossed over to the dark side, so I'll have to hear more about that.
I put a lot more money in that than I ever thought I would. Things got more channels than half my airplanes. Let's put it that way. That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? That's insane. Yeah, you're gonna have to get an IX-20 now to get all those. Or you actually have something that you have the FrSky one, don't you? That has all the channels.
Yeah, but I bought a radio for the wheel radio, but it's a 7-channel wheel radio.
Oh wow!
It's got
7 channels.
It's crazy. I was like, wow, I had.
I didn't even know they made 7-channel wheel.
No, I didn't.
Got a gyro,
they were all 4
on
channels.
Receiver.
Why would you need a gyro?
Yeah,
no, they've got
evidently not.
It's got because of with the crawlers, you've got gear shift for some, like high-low. You've got you can take the 2-wheel drive and the 4-wheel drive, the transfer case. There's the thing called the dig where it locks out the rear wheels where they just and you just kind of dig out with the front wheels. Like it totally locks the rear wheels. Like it's not even freewheeling, it just locks them. So it kind of gives you some resistance to drag it out with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a winch too.
Oh,
and that's on
nice.
a little key remote, but you got to plug it into a channel so it has power.
Right.
And then I've got lights. My headlights are switchable.
Okay.
So
I can see that.
got all kinds of
why the
colors.
gyro?
Yeah, so it's pretty darn cool. Yeah. Well, I think for some of the car racing, some of the guys use a gyro to help with the steering to keep it straight down the track. I'm not using the gyro on this. This receiver I have it's got gyro, it's got voltage. Actually comes with the plug to plug between your battery and your speed control that has the voltage.
Right.
So you can see the voltage. And so I was like, and it's really inexpensive for what I'm doing, but I put way more money in this thing than I ever thought I was going to.
Typical.
Yeah, I had a truck one time that a friend of mine gave me, and I think it was at the time that he gave it to me. By the time I got everything up and running and out running it, I had spent more than most of my most expensive airplanes at the time.
Oh my gosh! Well, I'm not that far. I just it had a good servo, like steering servo, but it was a good servo, but it wasn't good for a crawler, so I had to replace that.
Oh. Don't
just
they
all
have
these
to
long-
have one of those with like a really super long arm or something on them, right? They're not short.
Yeah, they're pretty long arm, but it was. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy put a high tech like an HS 645 Metal Gear,
Mhm.
but it froze up on me. Like something went south on it. So I don't know if it's because all the resistance that's on it. Even though it's a high torque gear, or geared, servo, it just doesn't work good with these. So I got whatever they said to get for the crawler.
Huh. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool. Something to go out and work with while it's hot. At least you can sit in the shade and just watch it crawl
here
around.
and do it. Yeah.
There you go.
Or you just sit right here and do it.
You can make an obstacle course in your front living room.
Yep. There we go.
Just at least sit in the AC. Yeah, there you go. Just crawl over the clothes. That's funny. Well, Jay, you had Mike come down again, I think, for the 4th of July or for the weekend.
Yeah, he came down for the 4th of July holiday for the weekend and everything. So he came down a little bit before and kind of stayed a little bit after. And we had a really good time. Even though he was just down like the week or two before, he came down for the holiday. Right. So that was rather nice. So usually when Mike comes down, he brings down a project or two, something that, he wants to work on or that he, he needs some help with. And this time he said, I'm not bringing anything down, Jay. We're just going to work on your stuff. And I was kind of like, okay, whatever you want to work on, I guess, so he came down and his thing was to try to, fix anything that I had in my little list of planes back here. He wanted to fix. And yeah. Pretty much I narrowed it down to like 2 or 3 planes that we kind of worked on for the period that he was here. And then he gave me some help on my 3D printers. But we had a good time. Pretty much we went out and we flew twice a day, every day. So we got up in the morning, flew out, got out there to go fly before this, after the sun came up. And then although it's not Arizona hot, it's been getting pretty warm here. So we pretty much knocked it off by like 9 or 10 o'clock. And then we came home and then we worked on, whatever planes we broke flying that morning, or if we noticed any problems, we worked on that during the day. And then we came back out in the evening after dinner. We'd come in right before it got dark. We'd go out and we'd fly again for another hour and a half or so, just dinking around with things. So it was fun. We just had a fun flying our butts off. And my buddy Jim came out and joined us for about 2 of those days. He was able to, get out there and fly with us. We really had a swell time. It was great. And we flew my Bison. So as I might have mentioned before, I somehow misplaced the screws for the flap and slats. I don't know how I don't know where they went. They give you this big bag of screws plus extra screws. And when Mr. Mike here came down, and we went and maidened it, I misplaced that bag and I have no idea where in this house I put them. And then when me and AK Mike were flying, the servo came loose. I had hot glued him, hot glued it down on the servo, and I wasn't using it, but it shook itself loose and came loose. And luckily while I was flying, I was coming in for a landing all set up and nice. It was looking great. And all of a sudden the plane just veered off to the left, and I'm like, whoa, what's this doing? So I would speed up, since I was getting slow, I, put the throttle in, I started to climb and the plane acted normal. And every time I slowed down to land, it would just veer off to the left. And I'm just like, what is this plane doing? And I go, I think the head of that, of that one of the servo came off. And, Mike was with me and he goes, well, what do you mean? Why would it veer off to the left every time you slow down? And I go, well, think about it. When I slow down enough to land or just before I land, air resistance is on the flap, on that flap, and it keeps it up. And then the minute I slow down enough, one will come down and it makes the plane, jerk to the left or right or whatever it was. So I just kind of landed a little fast.
You have leading edge devices too that leading edge devices that pop out as well, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So that would cause it as well.
At the same time. So it wasn't helping. But I just landed a little faster, and luckily that plane has really robust landing gear. So I was able to, I just landed a little fast and no problem. And then I came home and I dug through my, everybody has a little pile of screws. You got somewhere, you have a jar, you have a container, a drawer of just various screws. And I sat down, I scrounged through that thing, and I was able to find 2 screws, believe it or not, especially for servos. I was able to find 2 metal screws that fit my servos, and I was able to screw them in and fixed up the plane nice, and I didn't have any more problems. But yeah,
sweet.
That was a little scary, but it was fun. But anyway, during that time, let's see, what else did we do? Jim brought out a soft width camel that he had built like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and basically hadn't flown it for, like 7 or 8 years. I mean, so it just been sitting in the garage, hadn't flown.
Is this the one that he like grew a tree, got a seed from his grandfather? Took him 11 years to grow the tree.
Sure, had to plane the wood after he chopped the tree down. Yes, the whole 9 yards. So he put a lot of time.
I've heard about this I haven't seen it, but I've heard about this airplane that it took him a long time to build.
So he had a lot of time and effort into putting into this plane. So he gets out there and. So we get the plane started and we run the motor for a bit because, the day before he'd taken the carburetor out of it and, cleaned the carburetor, put it back in. And so we dinked early in the part of the morning. We finally got it running, let it, run for a while, and had to adjust the carburetor. And the carburetor needle for it was like, right next to the propeller. It was super, super close. And so Jim's like, yeah, I could probably put my hand here and maybe get it. And I'm sweating bullets because I'm just like, man, that is so close. Can you take the prop off and do it? He goes, no, you got to have a load on it. I'm just like, I don't know, and I'm looking at Mike. Mike's looking at me, and I'm like, well, so you're going to adjust that? And he's like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Well, let's see. The emergency room's over that way. So, okay. We could probably bandage you up and hold you till we get you to the emergency room. But, luckily, after talking to him, we were able to kind of convince him that, because Mike was saying, hey, on my paramotor, I have the same problem. And so I run it and then I adjust it and then I run it again. And so we were kind of able to convince him to go along with that. And so it all worked out. Nobody went to the hospital. The plane ended up running great. And then we flew it. And of course, just as we go to fly it, the wind picks up. It's gusting. It's getting to be, that time of the day where it gets a little, iffy to fly, crosswinds, the whole 9 yards. And so Jim's like, yeah, this plane can fly in that weather, no problem. And, so he goes and he takes it off and he's flying around and he's doing pretty well. And I'm like, oh, wow, that, this has turned out okay. So he's going around the pattern a bunch of times and we're thinking this is going to be no problem. And he's doing a couple of, test landings. And he brings in this one time and everything's looking good. And I'm relaxing and I'm like, oh, this is going to work out pretty well. And Jim gets, I don't know, about 20 feet up, but coming in for final. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, he's got a good glide slope. This is looking pretty good. And I don't know what happened. Just the plane kind of got a little squirrely. The wind hit him, however, and the plane was, you start getting to those oscillations and the plane starts getting worse and worse and worse. Mm-hmm. And, I made a command decision and I kind of grabbed the radio from Jim, which I think kind of surprised him. But, I grabbed the radio, was able to get control of the plane and took it around a couple of times. And I was able to finally get it in to land it. And, and we didn't break the plane, didn't do anything. Everybody was happy and overjoyed because, I'm sure if Jim would have crashed, he would have been pretty upset with, since he put so much time and effort. I was nervous because I didn't want to crash it after, hearing the story of how long it took him to build this thing. But yeah, everything turned out okay. Everybody was happy. The plane survived. The landing gear needed to be worked on because when he took off the landing gear, we saw something go spoing and kind of pop off of it and was hanging underneath it. We're like, ooh, is that bad, Jim? He's like, it's fine. We're like, okay. But yeah, it was definitely after that point, we knew we were alive. You get that pump and you're just like, man, I'm feeling alive. And this sport makes me feel, so invigorated. So yeah, it was definitely a very good morning.
Juice is flowing on that one.
Oh, it was definitely flowing. So, but it was a lot of fun.
This is interesting though. it's interesting because you have never flown that airplane. It is a big airplane too, right? Like it's like a third. It's like
third
scale
or third or
quarter
scale.
It's pretty big. Yeah, and you've never flown that particular airplane. He just had it out there.
No.
So to be able to get into PIO, which is pilot induced oscillations, and then take that and try to recover, kudos to you, because that, a lot of times that happens where it gets behind the curve, and getting it back out of that is a little troublesome. So good for you that you were able to get it on the ground.
Well, thanks.
And not panic, and Jim didn't panic and try to do something. So yeah. That's so how did it fly? Did you like the way it fly? I mean, this is a World War I, and it's not like you and I have a lot of experience flying World War I airplanes.
Right. Okay. So there's a couple of things with this. I'm right now I'm strictly an electric guy, right? And I'm just moving into, flying with Jim,
right.
And, I have one gas plane that I'm putting together, and I've been flying Jim's gassers. So there's that one thing of me coming from electric and then dealing with a gas or glow powered plane. And that is the lag, the power lag, right? In electric, you get spoiled with having 150% power right now, or, not yesterday, right now. I want all that power right now, everything you have. And the plane will give it to you for the most part. And so when you don't, so I'm thinking, the plane's having a problem. I give it full power. I'm expecting to get a whole bunch of power, torque, whatever I need. And when I give it, full throttle, and the plane goes, I'm just like, where's my power? So I'm expecting
there's a spool up time.
Yeah, there's a spool up time, and I'm expecting, everything right now. I'm expecting to take over control right now. And that's the part where I'm kind of trying to recalibrate myself for that, having that spool up time. And it's been throwing me quite a bit. Also for coming in for landings with some of those planes, I'll be let's say I'm at half power, and now I'm set up, I'm on final, and I'm setting up my glide slope, and I'm kind of getting that adjustment in for the wind and everything. And I go below, let's say half throttle, and I bring it down to like almost a third or just a little bit under half. And then the plane will just drop out of the sky. Whoop. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Why did it drop so much? And then I try to bump it up. I'm trying to get that feel for it. And I'm, then I'm doing one of these numbers, as I'm going up and down as I'm trying to come in for a landing, trying to set up that glide slope because I can't get the power setting right. And that's another thing that I'm trying to get used to, that I don't have to be, I don't have the fidelity of the electric of setting up the minute, setup that I want. And that with something with gas or glow, it's giving you, I guess you have a bigger, maybe not a bigger curve. What's the word I'm looking for? It's, there's a wider, I'm not getting small ticks of power increments. I'm getting a swath, I'm getting that a slice of it. So if I'm in that, like I said, below the half power, the plane starts to drop substantially, but it's okay. If I just leave it alone, let it build up some speed, and then I go to flare it or whatever, the plane will stop at whatever altitude. And that's just, I'm just not used to flying like that. So it's just been throwing me off.
So another thing that, probably because you don't have, a whole lot of gas time, is that people forget that with electrics, when you're not running electricity through that motor, when you cut the electricity off, it's a free spinning prop. There's resistance, but only magnetically, right? So it's very small. However, when you pull the power off of a motor, you actually get you still have that compression in there, and now it's like a Jake brake on a big truck. It gives you this power where it uses the motor to slow it down. So the propeller, where you would pull the power off thinking, I've got enough, that I need to go to idle power. Now it's actually acting as a brake, using the engine to slow itself down. And then you're like, oh crap, I need more. And that little 1 click, 2 clicks isn't enough to get that compression. There's definitely a difference between producing power and then getting this
braking effect.
You know the name of that, Shannon? I guess it's braking. Yeah. Braking. Engine braking. So you're getting that engine braking, pulling the power less than idle, there's that little spot in there somewhere that when you get to it, it's called zero thrust, I think is what they call it. And that's where the propeller and the engine are producing just enough that it's spinning at the right RPM, but it's not causing any aerodynamic braking or engine braking, right, and it's not causing any more thrust drag. So the drag is kind of at zero. But that's a good point. And, that was one of the things when I first started flying gas that I had to kind of get my head wrapped around as well. So that's good that it, maybe for that big of an airplane and then trying to get it in first time around. You told me, I think we talked about this, but you said you had to go around once or twice, right? Or
oh yeah, I flew a plane around. I had plenty of gas, so I just flew it around to get used to it. Because one of the things, being a biplane, it does have the short coupling. So I just kind of flew it around to get used to it, and and the plane was once again, it was very docile in itself, and it didn't seem to have any bad tendencies. Now I didn't take it up and do like stall tests or nothing like that with it, but once again, I'm flying it in a pretty good crosswind. It was gusty. So like you said, I took it around several times just to get the feel of it. And then I kind of had to caddy corner, so in the field I fly in, there's a road to the left, then the field, then there's trees to the right. So I, normally where I would just line up in the middle of the field and bring it in, the crosswind was such that I had to take it over to more towards the road and bring it in that way to get the crosswind in, so it wasn't, affecting it that much, and kind of bring it in at that angle and then straighten it out and I could land. But it was just getting it set up in that, I don't normally fly in that part of the field like that, so I had to just do that a couple of times just to get myself set up, lined up, so I could bring it in, slow the plane down. And that's the other part of it that was kind of scary, because I didn't know how much I could slow the plane down. Right. I ultimately probably should have taken it up to altitude, slowed the plane down, see what it does, to when it stalls, and that would at least help me. But at the time, all I could kind of think about was just let me, do a couple of practice touch and goes, or, bring it out on the field and see what's going on. And then I can just land it. So, but that was the only thing I was really, really worried about.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you guys had a great time at the field, and a lot of fun to be had. Yeah, however, in our last few minutes of time here, we have a safety sequence or segment, and
Mr. Safety,
brought to you by Mr. Safety, Jay Neely. So tell us, walk us through what happened there.
Okay, so once again, after a great day of flying, we came back to the house and decided to charge up the batteries to go back out that evening. And as Mike was going ahead and plugging the batteries in, so let's back up. So I have a parallel charge. I have a regular charger that goes into a parallel charger, which lets you charge multiple batteries at once. And it seems pretty foolproof, right? If you have a 3-cell, you put the balancing plug into the 3, the one for the 3-cell charging, and so on and so on and so on. Well, mine goes, it has 2 rows, and so let's say you have the charging plugs with the little nubs. Let's say they're facing this way, and so as you're going along, it goes down the row, and they're all the same. And then it's like it turns, to go to the next row, it's like they just turned it around. They started the row going the other way. So they're the 2 nubs on each row are facing opposite directions, 180 degrees.
Right.
So if you're plugging something on row 1, you can see them and plug them in. But if you're not really paying attention and you plug it in the same way on row 2, there is the possibility, even though it has those little nubs to help you push it in, and theoretically you can't push it in, but believe me, if you push hard enough, you can push them in. And basically that's what's happened. That's what kind of happened to Mike. Now, he was all, after it happened, he was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, it's not the first time that's happened, because as AZ Mike knows, this could happen to the best of us who do this all the time. And it's kind of amazing. if you're not paying attention and you can, it doesn't take much to push those things in to where you can get them to touch and have them arc on you. It's very excitable once it does that. It'll definitely get your attention. And in this instance, Mike pushed it into we're 5 cells. So it was a lot of potential energy as opposed to a 3 cell. So he had mistakenly put it in the 6 cell one. So it was like one off. And I think he put it in on the same side, going the same way. So he was able to get them all, no, actually they were opposite of each other. But he put it in the right way for the way the thing was going, but it was one off. And, either way, it was quite spectacular when he put it in. It made a very large crack. Sounded like, Thor was over there. And then I turned around, and then I'd never seen this before, but I actually saw flames. That thing was flaming. And so, so I was like, oh man, that's not a good thing when lithium batteries are on fire. At least fire and lithium batteries aren't good.
Never a good thing.
Not exactly. Never a good thing. But it wasn't the battery that was on fire. It was the little plastic, connector. It was the plastic connector that was on fire. Yeah. And so Mike, he immediately pulled everything off, and he had it in his hands. And so he's like, looks like he has sparklers in his hands, flaming sparklers. And so I'm yelling, hey, calm down, stop moving, stop moving. You're only making it worse by moving. So after he kind of calmed down, and we kind of, got everything under control, and, the fire pretty much put itself out. The damage wasn't that bad. It really wasn't. I mean, it looked like somebody put a flamethrower to my parallel port, but basically all he did was when he put those things in, it instantly fused or unsoldered all the pins on the board that touched. And pretty much that was it. So I happen to have a little connector, little set here. So I was able to just put the pins right back in, resoldered them. He didn't lift the traces. So, it only touched for just a second or two, but it definitely...
That's all it takes.
It only takes a second, but it wasn't as bad as it looked. I mean, it looked really bad at first, but like I said, he was quick enough to plug them in, separate them, that he didn't damage the board, and, all was good with the world. I was able to fix my board. My battery wasn't damaged. I'm still waiting for... I don't have 5S connectors. They're coming in the mail, and I'll be able to repair the battery. So the battery didn't have anything wrong with it afterwards. It just, like I said, just a little fusing or welding, as you would say, of a couple of parts, burned the connector off, and that was about it. So be careful with these things. Yeah. I mean, just because once again, you get lax around things that seem safe.
Yeah.
And like I said, my charger, the board itself, this particular board has a fuse in it, that if anything goes wrong, it cuts the power to it. But since it was on the charging plugs, there's no particular fuse for that. So it didn't even blow the fuse. So this was just a pure kinetic or, type of accident.
Well, I will tell you that for me, it's as I get older, I need my readers. I need reading glasses, and I will set them down, and I'll be doing something. And this particular time that I had the same issue, I did the same thing. I didn't have my glasses on. I looked down. I thought, oh, this is a 4-cell or whatever, and I stuck it in the 5-cell port, and it did exactly the same thing. It unfused all of those. Desoldered all the pins, and I was running through the house with this smoking battery in my hand, and my wife is in the background going, "What is that awful smell?" And I'm like, "Nothing at all." As I chunked it out in the backyard.
Nothing to see here.
Are you on drugs?
Nothing to see here.
Keep moving, folks. So yes, that is a safety tip for today. Please put your glasses on or your magnifying glass or whatever. Make sure you're plugging into the right.
For the older crowd, definitely.
Yeah, for the older crowd. So now I will tell you that Jay and I have had that issue. Shannon, on the other hand, perfect score so far, right?
Oh, I've had that happen long ago.
Oh, you have?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I had something similar not too long ago, actually. I got a Freewing T33, and when I went to go fly it the second time, I don't know why I didn't tell you guys this, or maybe another time, it had an XT90 male connector on the speed control. So you can use an XT90 or you can even use an EC5. However, if you don't put the EC5 on correctly, because it'll pop. Yeah, so I did the exact same thing with an EC with a 6-cell battery.
You're seeing little spots.
Oh man, and it just I mean, the pin on the EC XT90 was fried. Plastic on the EC5 was melted. It didn't damage anything because I've flown the thing like 3 or 4 times. It just was that sudden, energy right there. Boom, it melted a little bit of foam, caused a little bit of that burnt electrical smell, but it didn't fry the. Like I looked at everything. I took the ESC out. The ESC I looked at. It's fine, but yeah, it happens to the best of us. So obviously all 3 of us are here.
Yeah, that little spark, man, it's enough to wake you up.
It scares you. The not plugging a particular brand, but with the ISDT, they have their little 4-bank parallel charger. It's metal for one thing, the whole thing is, and then it has the pins, like all of the pins. So if you've got through 8, it's like you can do a 2-cell to an 8-cell, but it only goes in one way. You can't flip it over. It won't it won't work. So unless it was Fred Flintstone, he'd probably get a square peg round hole. But
that's true.
But it, it's pretty much boom. You can just it goes in one way. So I really like those.
Yeah. Well, it's a joy to be. They are expensive, and it's nice to have where you can charge 4 or 5 batteries all at once. That technology is around, but you do definitely have to be careful on it.
Yep.
Not burn your house down in the process. So. Yep. But we appreciate the schooling on that and the safety tip from Mr. Safety. Unfortunately, our time is up, and it's when you get to talking about funny stuff like this, it kind of goes by. But we will we'll continue this conversation here in 2 weeks. So from Michael here in Arizona,
Colorado, man, Colorado.
Okay, I'm on there. For Michael here in Colorado,
and Jay from the hills of Texas,
and Shannon from really hot Mesa AZ.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Let's fly.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.